Hi everybody, this is Will Conlon. This is being pre-recorded for the Sonic Art Collective radio show. We're live right now at Highland Coffees.
Yes, sir.
You can hear my friend Brad Walker, who's a saxophone player. Brad, where are you originally from?
I grew up in North Carolina, and then came to LSU in 2002. I've been in Louisiana off and on for that whole time.
And you gig a lot in New Orleans, and have been doing a lot of playing in the local area.
Yeah, as far as what I do for a living, I'm a freelance saxophone player. That's how I think of it. So I play with a lot of different people in New Orleans, play a lot of different styles, a little bit of jazz, lots of rock and roll and R&B, which is a big thing in New Orleans. I got started doing that when I was still living here in Baton Rouge, but it made sense to relocate there, be a part of what, in my opinion, is a very special and at this point, if not unique, almost unique situation in terms of a culture built around live music and live performance, and a culture that really values and learns and supports and spreads the word about its musicians. It's a different kind of thing, and it's the only place I know of in the U.S. anyway that still happens.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really special and unique things about living down here is that culture is existent. And I wish I got down to New Orleans more often. Being a PhD student is a little bit tough, just in terms of, you went through the master's program here. You know what it's like being in all these classes.
Yeah, it took a very concerted and conscious effort. It took splitting time between the two cities. For a little while I was living down there and coming up here to finish my graduate degree, which meant that I was getting up in the morning and grabbing coffee and hitting the road and coming straight here for class, spending all day in class at LSU, popping in the practice rooms to practice before I went home, and then hitting the road at 9 o'clock at night to head back to New Orleans. At which point I would go out to hear music or play if I had an opportunity, and then get up the next morning and come all the way back to Baton Rouge, just over and over again.
That almost sounds like getting to have your cake and eat it too. That kind of sounds like a nice thing for a musician to be able to do.
It's definitely exhausting.
That's not easy.
And one thing I found about New Orleans that's a little bit different than Baton Rouge, because Baton Rouge has a very vibrant music scene as well. I'm always telling people down there, like, man, you don't realize how many incredible players there are up here in New Orleans, and you don't realize how many interesting things are going on up here. And I've been at least trying to build relationships here for 12 or 13 years now, and so some of the people that I met in 2002, like say our mutual friend Ben Harrington, I've watched them grow within the scene, and then I've watched their efforts actually grow the scene.
Right,
so
which has been really exciting.
One of the things about New Orleans is it's very important to be present down there. One of the reasons that people call me to play saxophone is because they've seen me play or they've met me or whatever. So it's important to be present down there, which is why I live down there. But it's also very important to me to be active and present up here in Baton Rouge. This is where I went to college. I think there's a lot of great stuff going on. My piano player that plays in the group that hopefully you'll hear some of on the show tonight now lives in New Orleans, but until very recently was in Baton Rouge.
Right.
That's Oscar Rossignoli.
Yeah, good friend of mine. I went to go see him play when he did the piano competition in Florida, Pensacola,
Oh, cool.
A number of years ago. Really stunning player. I've seen him play with Brad Webb. Oscar's just a dynamic force in piano jazz for the scene.
Yeah, he's really, truly remarkable.
Yeah.
And then, of course, anyone who's been following Baton Rouge music for the last 10 years or 20 years would know Simon Lott, who's the drummer on this record, whose mom still lives here. He still comes up here. He's again, I think like me in the sense that we're now New Orleans musicians, but it's really important to maintain a presence up here and to be a part of what I think is a really great music scene in its own right. And I mean that's borne out by all the interesting stuff going on right now.
Right. It's been a really exciting time with Jive Flamingo and the Twisted Oaks Music Festival.
Very
We've had
cool.
a really, really nice blooming of the local music scene, and also just a plethora of just local bands that are drumming themselves up, and just people who are out making music.
But people notice too, man. Like it's mostly because I think people know that down in New Orleans that I know people here, that I lived here at one point. But if people ask me all the time, and I want to play in Baton Rouge, where can I play? Where can I go? Who can I talk to? And if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said, I I don't know, man. I'm not sure that there is a place for what you're doing up there, depending on who was asking. But now I say absolutely. There's this venue. There's, until recently there was Mud and Water. Now there's great stuff going on at Chelsea's, both in the main room and in the sidebar. Our friend Chelsea Lane is doing great things at the library at Northgate. It's not Northgate Tavern anymore, right?
No, it's
changed
the
names
library.
about 6 times.
Yeah,
since I started school here,
there's rumor of a curse on that particular venue.
Well, the curse has been lifted because there's lots of great stuff going on.
Well, that's
there
good.
now. But,
yeah, they've had a lot of nice local groups. I think the Easy's been there a couple times.
Could be. I wish I knew more about what's going on up here.
I wish I did too. Even having just jumped into being a radio DJ this year has been a big sort of awakening because I'm getting all this influx of music from people I know online, but it's also been a little bit downtrodden because I just realized how much I've not been in the scene,
right,
and how much I've not been putting myself out there, because as some of you who are listening may know, I'm also a saxophone player,
right,
nowhere near the kind of jazz player that Brad is, but
whatever.
Still like to toot my horn every now and then.
You're a great player.
Oh, thanks, man. That's means a lot. Yeah. Anyway, let's not get too lovey-dovey. So, Brad, when did you start this sort of new direction with this Red Raw Black pseudonym?
Cool. So,
pseudonym or band or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's all good. There's a couple different things. Like I said, I'm a freelancer in terms of how I make my living, but it was really important to create music sort of under my own name, and it just in the sense is like I feel like I have something to offer that I want people to hear, and maybe there's a place for it in the scene and maybe there's not, but in any case I definitely feel the need to put it out there. So I have a couple different projects. One that you were just talking about is called Red Raw Black, which is all built around like total improvisation. So like we don't have any tunes or charts. We don't really, every once in a while we'll do some light discussion of like what direction we're going to take, but
right,
more or less we don't structure anything, because we really believe that making music in that way, and I know that there are a lot of people here in Baton Rouge who believe the same thing, making music and using that process of being strict about no preconceptions, no planning, just being totally honest and totally in the moment and letting the music go wherever it needs to go. By using that process, you can get to places that you could never
imagine.
There's music that can come out of that would only come out of us through our relationships. And so that's a super interesting thing. You've been nice enough to play a couple tracks from that project on the radio, which is really cool. The other thing that I find really compelling is structured improvisation.
Right.
So that's what jazz is, structured improvisation. They would play a melody and then improvise over the same structure that the melody was played over. And that's kind of what this quintet project that we just finished a new record of is built around. So like we've taken a number of my compositions and then we've rearranged some sort of like modern, I call it like a modern American songbook. So like some current artists like Bon Iver and Sufjan Stevens and Sun Kill Moon and Aphex Twin, and some slightly less current artists like Keith, not less current, but some older artists like Keith Jarrett, some music from the 70s.
Great.
And we've built a book of music around that. So instead of completely open, anything goes improvisation, these are more structured. We create a sound built around structures that I've come up with and shaped with the guys, and then improvise within that.
Right.
And it's super interesting to me. It just so happens to be like a little bit more accessible and appealing. That's not why we do it, but it just, it's like it's got more melody to it.
It gives people something they can latch on to, something that might be familiar, something that
very often they are, yeah.
that might catch their ear, and also there's, as an improviser, the value of limits.
Sure, yeah.
On giving yourself really rigid limits to force yourself to try to be really creative.
Right.
And that's one of the sort of advantages of using structure. And I've been thinking a lot about this idea behind structured music and freely improvised music, because in my composing I do a lot of free improvisation with free improvisation on electronic effects.
Cool, yeah.
I've actually started to move that project into live coding, where
cool.
You're actually coding music on the fly,
right,
using algorithms and programming languages,
right,
in an improvisational context.
Cool.
I found it to be sort of extremely rewarding, and in similar ways that I imagine you probably felt, being able to sort of take a break from straight ahead jazz and sort of try free improvisation. But.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is sort of maybe too meta for a short radio discussion, but I really believe that like the best way to make music is just to be honest with yourself about what is compelling to you, and that's what you should share with the world. So like what you were just talking about with coding, and my friend Jeff Albert is very involved in that world, is a little over my head and isn't really like, that doesn't really speak to me as a performer. So that's not what I do.
Right.
But because that's what speaks to you as a performer, I'm so glad that's what you're doing. You know what I mean? And that's how I feel about both the projects I have, which are very different. They both come from a very genuine place within me, which is like, this is the music I feel like I was meant to bring to the world. Like I said, maybe there's a place for it on people's radios or, on their iPod or whatever, and maybe there's just a place for it, as a live performance act. But in any case, wherever this is meant to fit in the world, it's really important to me to bring it to the world. It's what's most important to me as a musician. If that makes sense.
That makes complete sense.
That's what we're all trying to do, is like sort of hone our craft of like what we feel is most genuine for us to say as musicians, and continue to develop and continue to bring it to listeners' ears, and hopefully to reach the right amount of people, reach the people that will be spoken to by what we're doing.
Well, that's a really beautiful sentiment. Thank you for sharing with that with us, Brett. I'm really excited to do the show tonight. I think I've planned to sort of pick through a lot of your playing over the years. I even have some recordings of the Incense Merchants from 2009, so we can sort of get a picture of where your work has gone since you've been here.
Thank you so much.
And that's just really exciting to be able to have an experimental music radio show where I can meet and sit and talk with a live experimental improviser and a living musician who's not dead for hundreds of years, which is one of the things that's important. Not that the music of old composers is less important, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the idea of the canon at some other time.
Definitely.
That's sort of an interesting question that I've been thinking a lot about.
Well, that's again, going back to like being genuine to yourself. I think that sometimes that's misconstrued by people. Like I'm not trying to imply that you should ignore the history and past of the music. I think, in fact, the more you know about the history and the past of music that's compelling to you, the more that will help you find your own voice as a current musician.
Absolutely.
I think the more that you're informed by the past, the more that you're free to live in the present and truly live in the moment. It's like when we get together as improvisers, whether it's in the context of compositions or whether it's in the context of totally free improvisation or whatever, I think that we are sharing together our shared chemistry with each other as musicians, our shared history with our own instrument, whichever instrument that is. I mostly play saxophone, but also play other things or sing or whatever. Yeah. All my shared history, all those hours in a room with my saxophone or all the other gigs I've ever done in my life come out in that moment. So that's already two types of dialogue going on between ourselves as musicians and between ourselves and our instruments. And also I think that there's this constant dialogue with the entire history of music that we're all aware of and maybe sometimes unaware of. And all those things come together to make the present moment of the music that's happening right there. All those things interacting together.
It's a very rhizomatic approach to music history and philosophy, though.
What does
that's okay.
mean?
The rhizome is a concept developed by Deleuze and Guattari, two philosophers that we don't have time to talk about.
Right.
But they basically envision the world as a series of interconnected things rather than thinking about the world in binaries and divisions. This is also sort of discussed a little bit in the philosophy of Michel Foucault and I'm going to blank on his name, Derrida, who we live in a postmodern world where binaries and subdivisions are still useful in helping achieve understanding about things, but we have to realize that they're not an end in themselves, and that the categories we make for the world around us are just categories in a process of creating understanding through dialogue. There's not a defined version of events.
Exactly, they're useful but limiting and sometimes dangerous.
Yes.
Definitely a necessary thing. Like you were talking about limits, or I often use the word restrictions. You know, like having, that's one of those beautiful paradoxes of playing music, is that sometimes the more limits you have placed on you, the more free you are. Because when you're faced with the almost limitless menu of choices you have as an accomplished instrumentalist, it can be overwhelming, and it doesn't necessarily, it can in the right situation, but it's not always conducive to creativity.
Not at all.
So I think sometimes, you know, having a set structure and a history within that structure can inspire you to things that are more compelling, or if not more compelling, at least more honest to who you are as a musician.
I think that's a really important message. Brad, thank you. This has been a great interview. I'm going to play pretty much all of it on the air. I think my questions are answered. We're going to hear several of your compositions. I'm glad you told me that the quintet project is separate from Red Raw Black, because that's an important distinction to say that, hey, this is formal composition and this is formal improvisation and this is informal improvisation.
Immediate, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because when I actually noted, I was listening to the pre-release and I said, this is very structured.
Very, yeah.
There are some choices in here.
Well, you know,
but there's also some spontaneity to the other playing that I find very compelling. Especially, I especially like, because I'm an effects guy and I love computer sounds, that you took it upon yourself to do live effects and to not do any post production.
No post production.
You entrusted the post production to some people you rely. Who you trust and know to do the mastering and the mixing.
Mixing,
but
yes.
live effects rather than sort of using post-production effect stuff. I think that's an important thing for people to be aware of.
You know, we're playing music in the moment, and I want them to react to the sounds I'm using. So like, not only did I use those, mostly through guitar pedals, not only did I use those live, I made sure the guys had them in their studio mixes so they could hear it, because it's way different. You know?
Absolutely.
It's
there's a whole nother dialogue between electronics and the improviser that we could talk about at some other point. That sort of always becomes interesting. The relationship with time,
for sure,
becomes sort of really expanded, which is really interesting. Anyway, guys, we're going to wrap up the interview. This is Brad Walker. The new album, Quintet, is coming out. There's a show tonight. No.
It's cool. I'll do a little
show.
PSA if you want.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. If you've got something to say, I'll cut that part out.
I'll tell you about.
Please tell me everything about what's going on right now.
Oh well, we spent this whole time talking about a lot of recorded music, but for me, still, like, the lifeblood is live performance. And there's a group of us that have been working really hard in Baton Rouge to create a space, like a listening room kind of space. We had it for a while at Mud and Water. It was going pretty well. That business is no longer able to support us, so. We're trying something a little bit different, but so we're doing a CD release show. We're celebrating the release of this quintet. All the guys will be there. Brian Seeger, who's one of the most incredible guitar players ever to play in New Orleans. Oscar Rossignoli, who we were talking about earlier. Nathan Lambertson, who's a truly great bass player, and Paul Thibodeau are going to join me. We're going to do a live performance of the record.
Excellent.
So we're going to play the record. We're going to play the compositions and then improvise within them. But we're going to play the record start to finish, part 1, part 2. We're going to do that on Thursday, December 4th at Chelsea's Cafe in the Sidebar. You can order dinner. It's almost like a jazz club pop-up, so to speak. So we're going to do like a listening room kind of environment at Chelsea's. Doors at 7 p.m. on Thursday, December 4th, and we're going to perform the new record, and then obviously we'll have it for sale if you're interested.
Well, I'm absolutely going to try to make it. Brad, thanks so much for doing this interview.
My
It's
pleasure.
been really fun. It's great to see you. Good night, Baton Rouge. This is 91.1 FM, KLSU. You're listening to the radio.